Well, thank you for joining the podcast today. I'm very excited to have author, and actually, he's written several books in the sales and sales meeting area, Chris Fleming from Louisiana. So, Chris, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate being here. This is my favorite topic, so I'm happy to talk about it.
Oh, great. And Chris has a very interesting career because you've been in the broadcasting arena for many years and led sales associates. And that's probably, I was telling Chris before we started, I've always had a passion for broadcasting and started in as my first year out of high school as a salesperson for a radio station. I didn't know how challenging it would be to sell real estate ads, but we'll kind of get into that in just a little bit as far as you've had a lot of success helping salespeople in the journalism, the radio business. So it'd be
Sure.
interesting to talk about. But wanted to start a little bit, let you tell our audience about yourself and kind of what led you into sales meetings and your writing and so forth.
Yes, so I was a graduate of Ithaca College in Ithaca, New York. I went for 3 years and graduated in 3 years. So I'll put that in my cap. But
There you go.
while I was going to school, I was working at two different broadcast properties simultaneously, which I wouldn't recommend. Because I always thought this is what I was going to do, and I thought I was going to be a broadcaster, like an on-air person. But one day, perusing the parking lot of some of the places I worked, I realized the nice cars belonged to the salespeople, and so I better learn that real quick.
Right.
I come from a retail background. My parents were in the retail business. My father still goes to work every day. He's 79 years old. He believes the place will fall apart if he's not there. It's more likely he would fall apart if he doesn't
Right.
go, but that's a whole nother issue. So I grew up selling floor covering retail to homeowners. So I already had some background in the selling world. It was a fairly easy transition when you come from the product side back to the sales side. You understand how it works, so you can explain to people what it is they're buying, why they're buying it, why they need it. So it was an easy transition for me. I actually owned some stations at one point in the early 2000s. Unfortunately, I used Wall Street money to do that. They always want it back. Funny about that.
Right.
Um, but after that, I became a trainer and spent a lot of time training salespeople in radio and TV stations across the country. And my last training assignment, that guy hired me after I told him, no way, there's no chance I'm coming to work for you. And I did it anyway. I spent 10 years in West Texas running a radio and TV company. I've been in the Midwest. Came from California to Louisiana. In Louisiana, I'm running a CBS television station in Lake Charles.
Very fascinating. So you've had a lot of experience with helping salespeople with some of the radio stations and TV stations you've worked at get out and encourage them to sharpen their skills and sell more radio and TV advertising.
Yeah,
Let's just kind of talk about sales meetings because a lot of brokers and managers today, unfortunately, especially post-COVID, are having challenges getting people to come into a sales meeting, or they just don't do sales meetings at all. I think, unfortunately, they have this mindset that maybe sales meetings are not that important. Why do you think sales meetings are important, and how can we get people encouraged with sales meetings? I mean, you wrote a book on sales meetings. By the way, I'll have this in the show notes, but it's 52 weekly sales meetings. Discover powerful ideas to drive revenue results. And really, I think sales meetings are important, but I'd love for you to tell us why you think
sure.
people should have sales meetings.
Well, I think selling is a communal sport, right? We're individuals and we participate in it, but you are not the only person going through what you're going through. And there's power in the group. What's affecting one person is affecting a second person, is affecting a third person. The origin of all the stuff that I've written was actually from walking the halls in places where I worked. I'd hear things and one person would be complaining about X problem, I knew that other people were having the same problem. So I would just address that. And that was my next sales meeting, something I heard in the hallway.
Yeah,
And I
that's
find that when
fascinating.
I'm addressing problems in real time with real world solutions, people pay attention. They actually look forward to going to it. I send an agenda the Friday before. I always have my sales meetings on Monday. I want to start the week strong. And so on Friday afternoon, I will send them the agenda of what we're going to cover, the time frame we're going to cover it in, and I will be judicious about that. I do not have meetings for the sake of meetings. I have meetings with a point. We are going to cover X, Y, and Z, and we will be done at this time. So everyone has an expectation. And as long as I meet that expectation and deliver the goods, I get very few tardies and non-attendees.
Yeah, that's great. And when I offer sales meeting seminars, I'm glad you said that. One of the things that I always try to encourage brokers and managers to do is to have an agenda. I mean, you need to start the meeting on time, you need to end the meeting on time, respect their
Yeah,
time they're spending with you. But yeah, don't just be having a meeting for the sake of having a meeting. Have something that you can integrate. And I love the fact that you're talking about things that happen to you, what you're seeing and kind of that pulse on the ground. I recently wrote a sales meeting on adding value, how real estate agents can bring value to the table, and how brokers can also utilize that same principle. And literally, Chris, I used just what you were talking about. It was an experience I had that week with a company and how they treated me in that scenario and how we could avoid that as real estate professionals. So those are
right.
great points. And I love how you send it out on Friday, the weekend before. I mean, that's a great suggestion. So thank you for
Yeah,
sharing.
yeah. I have certain expectations. I expect my sellers to submit a plan for the next week, also on Friday afternoon. So it's a fair exchange. I want to know what you're doing next week. I'm going to tell you what we're going to talk about because this is what I heard you say in the hallway. And I think it's a good use of time because I know on Friday afternoon at about 3:30 they're not working.
Right. Yeah.
I know
And
this.
yes, and that's a great point. And I love that you're starting your week out that way. On Monday, let's
Yep.
meet and what are your thoughts too? I mean, you don't want to use a sales meeting to um and I was guilty of this, so I'll be transparent. In my earlier days, I kind of used the sales meeting to correct maybe one person who was doing something wrong. And
Hmm.
then I thought, I need to talk to them one on one. My sales meeting needs to be about lifting everybody up or that common problem you were talking about, that there are several people that may have that same problem. But how do you start your meeting, or what walk us through
Yeah.
if we were in one of your meetings, how that would look or how it would feel to get things going?
So I start every meeting with tell me something good that happened last week. And I go around the room and everybody participates. And I don't care what it is. It doesn't have to be about work, but just something that you felt good about last week. Look, culture is defined by how your people feel on Sunday afternoon and Sunday evening before they have to come into work for you on Monday. If that is a fearful moment, then you have a culture that's a little bit off. So I want them to look forward to coming to work on Monday morning. I try to make that as pleasant as possible first thing out. Tell me something good that happened last week, something you want to brag about. Maybe your kid did something great. Maybe you had a trip somewhere. I don't care. Tell me something good that happened. So
Yeah,
now everybody's
yeah,
got a smile on their face,
exactly. I
right?
love that.
There's less fear. I go through a little bit of housekeeping, which is these are the things that are happening to us this week. In the television world, I go through programming changes because they happen. Hey, this is not going to be the same as it was last week. Here's the things that are going to affect you. We talk about some of the things, the tasks that we have to accomplish as a group. And then I will go to the lesson of the week, which usually takes me 15, 20 minutes. I know the attention spans are short, so I try to keep it succinct. I try to
Yeah.
get to the point. I say, I heard you talk about this last week. We made this call on this customer. This is what happened. This is how we solved it. Or we didn't solve it, but this is what we could have done.
Right. And you
And
answered
then
very, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, and then I give them tools and tips for the week, and I'm done.
Yeah, I love that. Excellent. Well, what I was going to say is in your book, and I love how you bring information into the meetings that you share. You have 52 meetings, one for each week, but your first meeting, you talk about kind of surrounding yourself with the right people. And that's so interesting that when I heard I was listening to it in my car. I figured out the other day, a friend of mine was telling me that how you can go into the Alexa app and change the accessibility setting to read. And so I used to download a lot of Audible books, and now I'd rather have that copy of the books. And so now Alexa will read the book to me. So I was listening to your book in my car, and she does a great job reading the books too. But you were talking about really who you hang out with. And I love that quote that you put in there that about generally what Jim Rohn said, and you reiterated that is we will be the average of
Yes.
the five people we hang around with. And so some great information in your book to bring those 10, 15-minute pieces to your organization to motivate them. What's one of your favorite meetings in the book? I would love to kind of hear
Yeah. So
your
I spend time thinking about inversion, and that's a Charlie Munger, principle. He's Warren Buffett's partner, right? He always said, think about the opposite of what you want, and then work like heck to make sure that doesn't happen. So I have a thing that I talk about where I put failure on the table for the customer. I said, this is what failure looks like, and then I work backwards from that point of view, right? This is how you can mess it up. But you and me
Mhm.
together, we can't do that because we know it's there.
Right,
And in the advertising world, there are only three things that people can screw up. One is the message is terrible. And we have all experienced bad radio and TV commercials. And if you haven't, call me, I'll send you some.
yeah,
Right. The second thing is we put it in the wrong place. You start marketing depends to 18-year-olds, right? That's not really going to work all that well. And the third thing, which is about 90% of all advertising failure, is not enough frequency. People wimp out on the commitment it takes to be successful. You can run one commercial a day, but you need about 4.5 years to make it successful. Or you
right,
can run 40 a day and you can cut the time gap down. But I know all of those things. So the first thing I'm going to do when I talk to somebody new, I said, look, we can screw this up. And then people make a lot of decisions based on fear of loss rather than hope of gain. Hope
right.
of gain is a Vegas element, where fear of loss is every day you and me living life. And as long as I get that on the table in the beginning, they're going to listen to me as the expert and want to know what I know because I know how to prevent failure. Because as soon as I take a dollar from somebody, they're going to expect success from me. So I might as well give it to them.
Yeah,
And that's one of
I
my
think that's a
favorite
great,
conversations to have.
I think that's a great point. What do you tell your new sales associates, and maybe you can relate that to new real estate agents. And
Yeah.
you kind of touched on that a little bit. So many times I will tell new agents, we talk about farming an area subdivision where we go out and hand out flyers. And just what you said, some of them will go and prospect or send out flyers or send out postcards for 1 day or 2 days, and then they quit and they think, oh gosh, I can't make any money selling real estate, and they'll get out of the business. And of course, I'm from a smaller office, and 6 months later, I get a call for that person. Yeah, they sent us a postcard where we want to list our home. And it just doesn't happen. The success doesn't happen that quick. But how do you handle new agents and or new sales associates for you in the same way? Or what would you encourage us to
Yeah.
really focus on with the new sales recruits?
So in your mind, and every broker is going to know this, what the average time period is for someone to reach that success point. And in my business, it's somewhere between 9 and 18 months.
Okay.
I have to be comfortable with that when I hire, and so does my candidate, because they're going to put a ton more pressure on themselves. Like we all think we're invincible. We wake up, think we're going to sell everything to every person we ever talk to.
Right.
And we know the answer to that is not true, right? That's not happening. The average success rate for sellers across all industries is 10%. So again, we have to put that part in our mind. We have to think about that 9 to 18 month block, and we have to figure out how we are going to move the needle for ourselves, how we are going to get better every day. There's that whole conscious competence method of learning that we've probably all heard about, where you only learn when you start to get uncomfortable. You get from a
Right.
place where you don't know anything to a place where you are the expert, but you don't do that without roadblocks and peaks and valleys. We have to go through that process. We have to spend our time improving our craft and having these kind of conversations where the stuff you say becomes the vernacular for you, the way that you communicate with people, because you're not good on day one. And I think
Yeah.
we all have to get comfortable with that and help each other along.
Yeah. And I think I love what you said there too. We have to keep that knowledge going and learning and don't get discouraged, keep trying. I know I went 6 months and never sold a listing, never sold a house, and took one day off. And I never will forget that. The day I took off, because my mom didn't hand anything to me. She wanted me to earn it the correct way. The day I took off, the lady who worked my floor duty, some people walked in and paid cash for a house. And it was like a real easy transaction. They saw a home. But I didn't get discouraged. And I kept trying and kept learning. And I knew that I was planting seeds, and I kept trying to perfect. And then I think it's when you get to that point where you start to learn and you build a little bit of, trying to think of the correct wording, but I had more confidence.
Yeah.
And once I started building more confidence in my presentation and the product, seemed like I was able to then move into to start seeing sales and the fruits of my work come about. You wrote
John,
a
I
book
think
on.
that
Oh,
I,
go
I
ahead.
think that selling is a transfer of confidence and emotion,
Yes.
right? And you have to have it yourself before you can even push it off to somebody else. Otherwise, you come across as a fake.
Right.
And in my world, most people think of salespeople and they immediately go to a used car lot, right? That's their vision in their head, and I have to overcome that by being a person who's not only knowledgeable but confident in that knowledge. And you're right about that.
Yeah. Thank you. Um, so with sales meetings, are you a believer in weekly sales meetings? And what
Mhm.
about the broker who says, "Oh, we just don't want to do meetings, or I can't get people to come in?" I mean, um, what is your thoughts for the person who doesn't do sales meetings versus the company who's consistently doing sales meetings? Is there something you would pick up on or encourage, or if you were coaching, that you would advise them on?
I think the reason that people don't do sales meetings is that they themselves don't know how. They don't know what to talk about. And they're probably a little further removed from the pin than they need to be. I make sales calls every day. I go with reps, I go myself. So I'm having these same conversations with people every single week.
Hmm.
And so I'm not far enough removed from the pin where I don't know what's happening in the marketplace. Right.
Right.
I think that in itself is a confidence builder. If you have the ability to stand in front of a room and say, "This is what happened to me last week," even if it's bad.
Yeah, I think that's really, those stories can carry so much credibility and weight with your organization. And I think they appreciate the fact that you are sharing those. You said something else, and I think this is one reason I love to do sales meetings. And you said this early on in that conversation. I missed following up on it. but it does build a synergy.
Yeah.
I'm not certain you use the word synergy, but you were talking about, getting everybody together. There's this excitement of everybody coming together. But I think does it does bring your team together. There's this synergy or this magic that happens. I don't know if you do you see that as well or
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that they feed off of each other. There's an energy in that because again, everybody has gone through or is going through the same things that everyone else is. We
right.
all are sellers, right? We're all out calling on people, talking to people, having conversations. Some of them go really well, and some of them don't.
Yeah.
And when you
Very
share those pluses and minuses, everybody can relate. We're all in the same boat.
And to me, and I'm sure that's what you're indicating is allowing those people to share, hey, here's how I overcame that, or here's a solution I used that someone else may not think about. Gosh, maybe I'll try that next time. It's
Yeah.
so very interesting. I'm going to throw a curveball at you because it's interesting your degree is in communications, but you have a
Yep.
minor in Central and Eastern European history.
Yes, I do.
Did Tell us a little bit about that. I mean, are there any sales related examples that you pull out from your European history? Or I know
Yeah,
it's kind of a
I've
curveball.
actually I can tell you why, certain countries hate each other today, right? Because that stuff goes back to the 1200s and you stole my GI Joe and I'm still mad at you.
Right.
I was fascinated with the Habsburg Empire. They ran Austria for about 400 years without a standing army. They just married off family members to the other countries, the other monarchies in Europe. And so there, at one point, there was a Habsburg on every throne except one in the European theater, including Russia and France and England. They were all Habsburgs. And so the alliances that they created also led to World War One. Right, that
Okay.
was the Habsburg alliance where the Archduke Ferdinand was assassinated on a bridge in Sarajevo in 1914, and it was done by a Serbian who was backed by the Russians.
Hmm.
But the Habsburgs were aligned with England and France, or aligned, I'm sorry, against England and France, who also lined up with Russia. The Austrians were lined up with the Germans. So all these alliances came into play. That's what I have a degree in. So
Okay.
um,
Yeah.
the part I like most about that is I only had to learn it once and it never changed.
Yeah.
So that's
Very,
basically the height of laziness. Um, I read all this stuff, I had all this knowledge, and I found out I could get a degree in it. But once you learn it, it never changes. Unlike the sales profession, which is always evolving because
right.
it involves people, right?
Right.
It involves people and behavior. I spend more time now studying psychology and reactions to behavior. When you say X, Y happens. When you talk about this happens. I look at cause and effect a lot rather than just saying, well, these are the words you have to say, right? It's how you say
Okay.
them, how you deliver them, how you make people feel about doing business with you.
Interesting. Very fascinating. Well, one last thing I do while we have you on here, and you're the expert in this field. And by the way, be sure and check out he has several good books on Amazon you can check out, and we'll put your link to your website in the show notes as well. But
Sure.
we have brokers and managers, real estate agents, team leaders watching this. I think sometimes real estate agents forget, or not all, but sometimes they think, oh, I I shouldn't run radio ads because I've got to show someone's house. Um, but we still have to promote and build our brand in the community. And I always try to remind agents that it's kind of like you're running for political office. When someone's thinking about getting ready to sell their house, you want them to think about you or your brand. But I think radio and TV today might be that hidden gem for some brokerages or teams or sales agents to really reach an audience because the demographics that you have and the way that you can help someone really pinpoint when and where their ads should show up. What would you suggest if a broker or manager said, I might want to think about doing some media advertising? Where would we start and what are your suggestions?
So I would start by talking to somebody who knows something about it. I'm available, by the way.
Okay.
But first, get the message right. What is it that you want to say? And it shouldn't be, I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread, but it should be something that resonates with people that are thinking about selling their house. The average gestation period for somebody thinking about it is 21 months, right? You
Hmm.
know this. It's not like somebody wakes up one morning and says, "Oh, I'm going to sell my house today," or "Hey, I'm going
Right.
to buy a house today." Very few people are in that boat, right? There's a lot of planning that goes into it. So the second thing to think about is how long is appropriate. Now, I'm biased because I sell this stuff for a living, but I will tell you that once you start, you should never stop
Right.
because people are always cycling in and cycling out of the purchase funnel. What has happened in the last 10 to 15 years in the advent of the social media world is people have done a clearinghouse on the bottom 4% of the market, people that are going to do something today. And therefore, we all believe that every advertisement should have an immediate impact. We have to realize that this doesn't happen when it's a 20-month gestation period. My best example is a grand piano. How many people are going to buy a grand piano today? One.
Exactly.
And how long does that take? And have you priced one recently? Right? It's going to be a long gestation period. You have to let that happen. Just like getting good at the craft. You're not going to be good
Exactly.
on day one. You're going to be good on month 9 or month 18.
Right.
That's how advertising works. It's a cumulative impact over time. Find what I'm if I'm a broker or if I'm an agent and I want to create a name for myself, I'm going to find the radio or television station that has the highest concentration of homeowners. In my marketplace, that happens to be my outlet. I run a CBS station. I have about a 174% index on homeowners. So if you want to talk to people that own homes that might think about selling them, I'm a good outlet. I can help you with that, right? Do that with frequency over time. What's the success rate you need to make that make sense to you? Is it
Hmm.
1? Is it 2? Is it 3? Is it 10? And as long as your input and your output balance, that's a good investment.
Yeah,
If you got
exactly.
if you sold 3 houses at a average house price of $410,000, I'm hypothetically making up those numbers, by the way. Does that make economic sense for you? If it
Hmm.
does, we should do business together. And as I tell my customers, we should do this for the rest of your natural born life. And if it ever stops working, I expect you to fire me.
You're
Can we
right.
work under those conditions?
And what you said earlier too is the right message. I run an online real estate school, so I do a lot of follow-up emails and one of the things I've really tried to do is make sure my database is cleaned up with the right people. And so long story short, and you're probably familiar with Robert Collier, he was an older copyright editor.
Sure.
And I remember Robert saying or reading in one of his books, you have to have the conversation. You have to know what the conversation is that's going on at the dinner table or at the copy machine. And Robert was always big on that's what your message needs to resonate. That's when it will resonate. And so what you're saying, and I kind of picked up from that is we need to know what are those conversations? Are do we need to wait till interest rates come down, or is now a good time to sell our home? Or there's all those questions that we know as real estate professionals, and there's so many effective ways that someone like you can help them deliver that message
Right.
through radio and television. So to finish that, I was sending out an email and so Chris, I thought, okay, what's going on at the dinner table for people who might be wanting to get a real estate license? And I immediately thought they're probably trying to figure out how can I make extra money or get a second job with with the economy and the condition it's in right now and prices higher than what they are. And so that was my message in my email was, hey, real estate can be a great in second job for
Right.
you. And it was a very successful email. I didn't have to use artificial intelligence. I wrote it myself, but the message was really think about real estate as a way to generate some additional income. And it turned out to be a very successful email campaign. So I just was reminded when you said that to have that figure out what that conversation is and the message to get it right. And I think radio is a great way for real estate brokers to leverage their brand because there's just not a lot of people who use radio, a lot of competitors, I should say, in the real estate industry using radio. So you could definitely stand out and do well. So
Yeah, I
thank
would suggest when you get the message for the first time, read it out loud because it sounds different out loud than it does in your head,
right,
right? And then after you have read it out loud, say these words, so what? And if you can't answer that, start again.
right. Yeah, that's excellent. I love that. And so anything you want to kind of thank you so much, Chris. This has been wonderful. And again, his book, 52 Weekly Sales Meetings, Discover Powerful Ideas to Drive Revenue Results. He's also the author of Yes, I'm a Salesman, You Can Be Too, and You Can't Lead from the Back of the Room. A lot of, you've got another book besides that too,
Yeah,
Chris,
I'm actually
and
almost
doing a
finished
weekly
with
sales meeting podcast.
21st Century Sales Success. I probably will release this next week.
Oh, cool.
Um, and then I've got another one that I wrote about 2 years ago called Making a Name for Yourself and Your Small Business, which is all about messaging for small businesses using electronic media.
Great. I love that. So we'll have all of Chris's information in the show notes. Be sure and reach out to Chris if you have any questions. Anything you want to add before we close, Chris? Or
I think selling is one of the noblest professions we can all be in. So I congratulate you if you're doing this. And if you've been doing it a long time successfully, double congratulations.
great. Thank you so much, Chris. We appreciate your time and appreciate you being on the podcast.
Very good. Thank you for having me.